That's basically the gist of today's show, is that we are recapping the Michigan State men's basketball season, the whole shebang, whole season. It's going to be great. So first things first, let's address the high expectations that MSU had entering the season, right? They had a lot of veteran and freshman talent, a lot of people excited for Xavier Booker, right? And then they finished at 20-15. So I guess people were expecting to see something more. They didn't get it. And I guess what's your take, or what's your story as far as where MSU what happened?
What happened is it's a variety of things. I think there were some miscalculations on the part of the coaching staff. I think that there were some unfortunate, extenuating circumstances that happened throughout the season and even before the season started. And I think that, they were rated number 4 nationally in the AP to begin the year. You're playing on your home court to James Madison, ranked number 4, and you lose opening night. People, I think, had a skewed view, in large part because that number 4 ranking was based around a lot of things, and a lot of things that didn't end up happening. It was based around MSU's freshman class really being, one of the best freshman classes in the country as they were coming in. This was a top 5 recruiting class wherever you looked. And if you just kind of look from guy to guy, one of them was a redshirt. I mean, there was a 4-star recruit that was a redshirt. There was a 5-star recruit that was nowhere near where the coaching staff thought he was going to be coming in. And he didn't end up getting meaningful minutes until late February, March. And the other 2 guys, while one of them got shot, and in January and over Christmas break, right? Yep, and then the other one was a phenomenal athlete, and he's just not as well rounded of a player as he needs to be to get to the next level. And that's not anything against him. It's the truth of the matter. He was not supposed to be the Cohen Carr was not supposed to be the main contributor of the freshman class. And that's just the way it worked out. Some of it was extenuating circumstances. Some of it was a miscalculation on the coaching staff. I think that Tom Izzo and his staff really regret not going out and getting a transfer center. I think that they thought that they had a group in Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper, Xavier Booker, and Mady Sissoko to kind of, as a committee, do enough work where the guards can take the team places. Because this is a team where the guards, like Thomas Izzo said, these 3 guys, Jaden Akins, Tyson Walker, and A.J. Hogard, were all on magazine covers in the offseason. This was top backcourt in the country coming back. Jaden Akins went nuclear in the tournament the year prior, showed that he can be a 2-way NBA kind of guy. And he was inconsistent throughout the year. Tyson Walker was brilliant at the beginning of the year. He averaged 20 points through 10 games, and then for the rest of the year, I think he averaged around 15. He had some injuries, just wasn't the same player. So I think that to answer the question, to kind of circle back, that number 4 ranking was predicated on a lot of things happening that didn't happen, and those were kind of what I just described.
And it's crazy too, because I hate the feeling like a lot of people say that Tom Izzo isn't trying, or doesn't want to, getting to the tournament is good enough for him. And it's I think if you're doing anything, he's obviously passionate. Why would he still keep doing it unless he wanted to, because I think if you listen to interviews back at the beginning of the year, before the year, he really thought or had confidence in that this was going to be one of his best teams that he's ever had. And I think you are right, and it is fair to say that a lot of things didn't end up happening that they thought would happen. And I think that they thought that Mady Sissoko would turn out to be someone who would do more stuff.
And Carson Cooper would develop more than they thought they would. And Jackson Kohler wouldn't have gotten hurt in September and missed the first 2 months of the season. They thought he was going to be, and Izzo's come out and said it, they thought he was going to be a significantly more part of things than he ended up being because of that injury. They thought that Xavier Booker was going to be farther along. They thought that, like you said, Sissoko would kind of round into a consistent, not great, but consistent force like he was in the last 3 games of this season.
So then, as someone who's been around the team for the whole, for the season, like, I guess I want to talk about Booker for a second because, that progress that he made from like when we saw him in December to like see him in, January, February, March, like that is crazy. Like that is like he actually looked like a guy who can compete out there with, some of the other players. So I guess talk about him. Like what did you notice?
It is crazy because this is a 5-star guy we're talking about. I mean, purely based on, honestly, size and potential. Like, he was not necessarily this force in high school when it came to, playing on the court. I think he was the second or third guy on his team in terms of points. He's just a guy that is 6'11", has a beautiful jump shot, and has a 7'6" wingspan. So just when it comes to that, I think he just shot up from being unranked to being a 5-star recruit. And then he commits to Michigan State, and he comes in, and there was a lot of things that were keeping him off the court. Some of it was mental, as I said, that he just didn't have the motor early on, and then you can get into like what is motor. I guess
what is that? What does that mean?
I would describe it as I would describe motor as knowing what it takes sometimes to do certain things like internally and like drive, competitiveness, aggressiveness, kind of all play into that. But it's just such a weird dynamic that this 5-star recruit ended up having this path. And at the end of the North Carolina game, where their season was over this past weekend, he did say, "I'm coming back next year for sure."
Yeah,
he said, "I'm coming back."
And that probably will end up likely being his last year, right? Because if imagine about the progress
Absolutely.
that he did from the beginning of the season to now, expedite that.
If he can stay healthy, he will be going to the NBA after next season, most likely, because you hit it spot on. If you watch him in the tournament in January, if you looked ahead to the future and you saw him playing in the tournament, you'd be like, wow, it's like a beautiful sight, because he not just gained the physicalness, he gained 20 pounds over the course of the season, let alone the offseason where I'm sure he gained some weight and muscle, but he gained so much confidence. And that was the biggest thing for him, was just being on the court. And, I think that Izzo handled him, in hindsight, perfectly, because you put him on the court in December and January when he's not ready physically and mentally, it kills his confidence. It kills all of his spirit, his motivation. And I don't think that they needed him. He wasn't the answer to their problems at that time. The answer to their problems was, the play from their senior guys.
Right, that those are the guys that should be stepping up right now.
And those are the guys that warranted Michigan State that number 4 ranking, having been to a Sweet 16, having beaten, sort of a nationally respected team like Marquette in the tournament. And you have this 3-headed monster at the guard spot that you don't need a game changer at center to win a national title. You have Malik Hall, who ended up being exactly what they hoped he'd be at the end of the season, February and March, but he wasn't that way the whole year. A.J. Hoggard was incredibly inconsistent throughout the year. Scored 3 points, went 1 for 10 in the North Carolina game. And that was just sort of emblematic of the season. In 40 minutes against North Carolina, Michigan State was everything that they had been all season. A fast, experience-led team, a team sort of just fighting to stay afloat and in the game, and then they were a team who's crumbling for 3, 4, 5 minutes was ultimately enough to just completely bury it.
And obviously they started off with that loss against James Madison. And I don't know if you'll agree with this, but obviously nothing was ever great throughout the whole season. But I want to talk about really do you ever really think that MSU was on the cusp of missing the tournament? Until, I'm talking about the narrative of their whole season, right? We're talking about, late December through January and February. Do you think that MSU, until the last couple weeks, which were a little rocky, Do you think that
Well,
before
I can
that...
take you through like sort of my whole journey with that throughout the year.
Absolutely.
So they start off 4-5. They drop their first 2 Big Ten games to Wisconsin and Nebraska, and so you enter the Christmas break period where normally that's like a down, and they did play some pretty low major teams that they beat up on, but they played Indiana State over the holiday break, which, I mean, talk about scheduling malpractice. I mean, Tom Izzo, the mid majors that you schedule in a season are James Madison, Indiana State,
that's
Oakland.
interesting.
It's just
all teams that
on top of
are
playing,
really, really good mid majors.
On top of playing Arizona, Duke, Baylor. You name it.
I think, and especially after last year, like the scheduling nightmare that he kind of gave himself.
Well, it's like that every year, but this year was incredible because of the James Madison and the Indiana State particularly. Anyways,
right.
So that Indiana State win ended up being huge for their tournament resume. We didn't know it
because they had ended up having an incredible season, finishing 29 in the net.
If they had lost that game, they might not have made it at the end. So if you keep going through, they kind of found themselves in the middle of Big Ten play. They won, I think 13 out of 17, and they were sort of heading toward this like 6. Like if they kept winning at the rate that they were, if they won the games that they should to end the year, and a game or 2 in the Big Ten tournament, they would get like hopefully a 6 seed. That's what a lot of Michigan State fans were looking at it, saying we could end up getting a 6 seed. And then having to play, into a 3 seed in the round of 32, and then 2, then 1. So that's kind of like, a decent spot.
Right.
And then they had played 2 home games in a week against Iowa and Ohio State. Both games that they were heavily favored in. I think double-digit favors. And they lost both.
Yeah. The Ohio State one was tough.
Inexplicable, because they were up by double digits in the second
something
half.
like that, and they just completely...
And it was just like the most uninspiring, like...
And they had a lot of offensive trouble, right? And then, like, I know, because, like, that's one of the knocks on Booker, right? Is that, like, he started that game. And that I think that was the Booker controversy.
He started that game, and he played well.
He played well for 17 minutes, and then he didn't play very much longer.
And then the coaching staff rode Sissoko down the last 8 minutes of the game.
Right. And I think that was the troubling decision, because... and we're not I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or say, because we've already discussed this at length. But that was hard, because Booker provides offensive value to the team, right?
A lot of offensive value.
And yes, his biggest weakness right now at the moment is his defense. Like, that's where he's a liability. However, at that point, it was like, at this point, his offensive prowess definitely outweighs his defensive risk, and so that was the thinking there.
And that's just kind of you pick your poison if you're Tom Izzo. You don't. Thomas would rather lose a game because they can't hit a shot than lose a game because he's getting beat up on the glass.
Right.
Like someone misses a cutout and you lose the game. Like, he would much rather lose the game because you have a center who can do virtually nothing offensively. And then so they lose those 2 games. Mm-hmm. They win the next one against Northwestern. Sorry.
By the way, he is rattling all these off the top of his head. Like, he doesn't have anything in front of him. I'm talking about you. You're just like doing this off the top of, like, crazy. I'm just very impressed.
I just got it wrong. So, the 2 games, and then they go to Purdue, and they lose by 6 at Purdue. It's a very, very promising loss.
Yeah.
Sort of a moral victory, even though there are no moral victories if you're an athlete or sports fan.
Right. Like, moral victories are hilarious. Right?
That's just a funny concept. Yeah. But anyways, they sort of showed the effort that they didn't show against Ohio State and Iowa, where it kind of showed like, okay, this team, they have what it takes effort-wise.
Mm-hmm. And didn't they play well against Purdue twice?
They did.
Right?
Yeah. And so that was the first time they beat Northwestern on senior night by 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the final game of the year, it's at Indiana. Indiana struggled all season, but it's their senior night. It's going to be a tough game to win. And they held, I think, an 8-point lead in the last 6 minutes of that game. And if they had won that game, you could firmly pencil them in to the
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's a road win. They didn't have many of those. And they ended up losing the game in the final seconds
by one.
Indiana makes a shot. MSU comes down, misses a shot, and then all of a sudden you're sweating going into the Big Ten tournament. Thankfully for Michigan State, they won against Minnesota to open the Big Ten tournament in a game that was pretty much necessary for them to win if they wanted to make March Madness. In the grand scheme of things, because fast forward, the next day they lose to Purdue by 5, another game that they could have won had they maybe had a little better shooting night or stay out of foul trouble. That was a big part of it. So then that Saturday of championship weekend, Michigan State was firmly in the conversation, and they ended up being firmly in the conversation when all was said and done. But what happened on that Saturday night was, as a lot of these tournaments were wrapping up, a lot of the other conferences have their championships on Saturday night. A lot of really middling teams in these conferences ended up making runs and winning their conference tournament championships,
like NC State, right? And
exactly.
like
the Bid Steelers,
Oregon, right?
The Bid Steelers,
right.
The Bid Steelers. There were, I think, 6 or 7 Bid Steelers.
In hockey, we call them line movers.
Duquesne, Oregon, NC State,
a bunch of them.
A bunch of them, like teams that would otherwise have no business making the tournament.
That's crazy.
Make the tournament, and now all of a sudden it's pushing all of these.
So is that kind of why MSU, even though they did end up making it in, they were kind of at a 9 seed? Like, it was kind of like, I know some people said it was high.
I don't think it necessarily ended up affecting their seeding.
Okay.
I think it just was making a lot of people nervous because that bubble, they call it the bubble.
It shrinks.
The 10 or 12 teams or so that are in that 8.
And it probably is what forced Indiana State out of the tournament.
It is. Right. It is. And unfortunately for Indiana State, they lost their conference
tournament
to Drake,
right?
Who is a good team.
Their bid.
Yeah, is a good team, but they're not better than Indiana State. They didn't have a better year than them.
Right. And now they had one better game.
And they had one better game, and now they're playing. Now they're dancing, and Indiana State's not dancing.
Can I say something really, really quick? This is a hot take, but I think that conference tournaments are so stupid. Like, I hate I just
it's not that hot of a take.
It really, because I don't know who else agrees with me.
Because it doesn't affect the seeding really. Like people, the Big Ten tournament championship is literally 20 minutes before the selection show.
Right.
The game ends.
They've already determined who's going to be in.
The game ends and it's like, okay, and celebrate for 20 minutes. Now you go find out what seed you have.
Right.
And so the committee has come out and said that these games, especially like the championships on the final day, like they don't really matter.
So the only thing that actually matters is if you weren't going to otherwise, like Michigan, for example, wouldn't have gotten in the tournament. I mean, they didn't, but they needed to win the Big Ten, and they weren't going to. But my point is like these teams that their only option is to win.
Yes.
Right? That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
And I think that's lame because it doesn't your regular season matter more.
But what I was going to say is it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really move the line in terms of seeding, but it can affect the field in the way that some of these Bid Steelers just rise out of the ashes, and all of a sudden,
I guess it is nice that it gives them a reason to But wouldn't you feel better in a system? And I'm not trying to get like all sort of morally like how should we change the system or whatever. But wouldn't you feel better in a system where like the regular season champion made it, and then also but I don't know for I don't know what you would do for mid majors because are you giving more mid majors more spots?
It is funky how it's based on the tournament championship.
It's based on one
5-day,
and it's one game. It's a single elimination.
We got to win 3 games to get there.
Well, but you got to win every game,
right?
And if you lose once, bye, see ya.
And that's just
do you think it'd be double elimination?
That would be the argument for expanding the NCAA tournament.
Interesting. But a lot of people that want to expand the tournament want to put more of like. I don't know, like who did?
You're right.
Like they want to put Ohio State in or something. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like that's I think the problem is they only care about their own conference.
It is a problem, but
anyway,
in Michigan
State's
in Michigan State's defense, they ended up not even being that close to falling out. They were the highest rated 9 seed, so they ended up being 10 spots away from missing the cut.
Do you think that it was fair, like how the committee graded MSU?
I do. I do. I think that when I was looking at all the Twitter bracketologists and stuff on Selection Sunday, I sort of was basing all my opinions around them, and they all sort of had a similar idea of how things were going to turn out. Michigan State, almost all of them had Michigan State in the play-in game and day-in.
Okay.
So I went over to the Breslin that day, like an hour before the show, just kind of get my head straight, write a little bit, do some prep, and everyone's talking about the play-in game. Oh, you're gonna have a Michigan State, Virginia, Michigan State, St. John's. Tom Izzo, Rick Pitino. That was just sort of the whole narrative. So I go in there and I'm thinking, okay, like we're going to Dayton. Like I had to.
You had like probably a whole story written out.
I had like a little summary lead and stuff going for it, for both options. But I went in there and was like, okay, we're Michigan State's. I'm going to be traveling to Dayton, and 60 hours or 36 hours. So,
and that would be probably a drive for you then.
Right. And honestly, I'm so glad that
you got to fly.
Oh
yeah, I bet you are.
But I was sitting in they didn't let the media watch with the team this year. They have in the past. This year, it was just the team and family and whatnot. So the media was watching it in a separate room, and they were going down. They're listing off the regions, and there's a couple they announced a few plans at the 10 spot, and Michigan State wasn't in there. They announced a few teams that I thought were going to be out completely. And so, they announced 3 regions, and all these teams that I thought were, like Virginia and Colorado State, they announced that Virginia Colorado State play-in at the 10. I think it was the region before Michigan State's region, and me and sort of all the other writers in the room just kind of were like, we didn't outright say it, but we all just kind of we knew that this is not good for Michigan State. They're probably going to miss the tournament based on what we had gathered from the media, as a whole, the national media. Based on what we had gathered from them, we had determined that they're out, they're not going to make the tournament. And then they came in as a 9 seed, and we were all just kind of oh my gosh, total curveball. Yeah, watching that Selection Sunday was very I was I texted somebody that covers MSU, and that I'm and I was like, do you think they missed it? As a 25 in the net, do you think they missed it? Really, And then they came back for the commercial, and it just ended up being in the final bracket that they talked about, which was kind of a sweat, So Indiana State ended up being the highest ranked team in the net ever to not make it. And it would have been Michigan State. I think MSU was 25. Right. And Indiana State was 29. Right. Something like that. I think it was 33. Before it was 33. Yeah. You're absolutely correct. Yeah. You're just rattling these off. I don't know how you do this with just off the top of your head. You got brain knowledge just floating. You just remember everything. It's crazy stuff. So lastly, I want to leave off with just kind of what does MSU need to do going forward, into the off season to prepare for next year? I think that they're in relatively good shape for next year. You have Jeremy Fears coming back. Izzo's repeatedly said that he's a guy that he thinks can lead a team, and he's always said that coach or player coach teams are so much better than coach teams, and I couldn't agree more. Jeremy Fears is a guy who embodies that. Xavier Booker's going to make a ton of strides, just oozing potential and talent. He's going to be an NBA player. Jaden Akins could come back. I think that, based on talking to him after the North Carolina game, it seems like that's kind of where his head's at. And then so you'll have him back. Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper, Trey Holloman, Garrick Norman, and then you have a decent freshman class. Pretty good. Right. I mean, it's not as good as the last class, but that was a top 5 class in the country. It's a couple really, really talented guards, big and small. Kurt Tang's more of a shooter, ball handler, and Jace Richardson's more of a bigger guy, can really drive it and shoot it. And then a bigger guy, Jesse McCullough, is more of a power forward, 6'8". And I just think that they're all Izzo's going to like his team going into next year. He's probably going to go get a transfer. He realizes now, I think, the mistake. Yes, and it's not that he doesn't like transfers. I mean, he's gotten transfers as early as Draymond Green senior year in 2012. He went out and got Brandon Wood from, I think it was, like somewhere in the MAC. Bryn Forbes in 2016 was a transfer. Aaron Harris, Tyson Walker, and Joey Hauser.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. No, yeah.
He's not afraid to use the transfer portal. It's just
it's probably the culture, that, like the actual oral.
He and his staff made a miscalculation, and I do think that he doesn't necessarily like the landscape of the transfer portal. But him and his staff made a miscalculation, and he knows that. And I think that at the time when they didn't think that they needed to go get anybody, that was kind of convenient for him to beat up on the transfer portal.
Right.
And, we don't need anybody.
We're good. We're good.
We're not gonna like we're loyal to our guys, and then the team just ended up being, insufficient. To do what they thought that they were going to be able to do, and I think that their ceiling is higher next year with a new culture. You're sort of moving on to a new era of Michigan State basketball. Tyson Walker lists, AJ Hoggard lists, Malik Hall lists, possibly Sissoko lists, era of Michigan State basketball. So I think that, in all honesty, that's a good thing for them, because while at many times throughout 2-3 years, those guys were able to show that they had the potential to do great things, they just never got it done. And bottom line, at Michigan State, if you're, in that basketball program, you're a talented guard, you got to be able to get it done, and getting it done means Final Fours.
Wow, crazy. I don't know. I'm excited for MSU basketball. I mean, I think I'm excited for football too, but we'll get there.
Big Ten championships, Final Fours. If you're not doing that at Michigan State,
then what are you doing?